Girl, please stop talking. Please stop talking right now.
Yesterday on The View, there was a discussion about support for Trump's impeachment, and it got pretty heated. So in this video, I'm going to show you the clip. I'm going to give my thoughts. I'm also going to discuss what I think is missing here in this entire discussion. And I'm also going to show you reactions on Twitter from both Meghan and people online. So first, let's get to the clip.
You had so many senators that voted to not only impeach but also convict President Clinton for, yes, perjuring himself. Yes. Many of those same people are still in the Senate. I cannot believe that they would vote to impeach and convict a sitting president for perjuring himself, and they would not vote to convict a president
and remove
a president who clearly wanted to use a foreign government for his own personal benefit to impede our very democracy.
Right.
That is the height of hypocrisy for this Republican-led Senate.
But my job
I don't
here,
understand that.
My job here is not to litigate the ethics of it. I'm an ABC political analyst along with being a View co-host. My job is to analyze the politics of it. And I'm telling you
but
the
I'm not
politics
talking about you. I'm talking about the people that are
the
senators that are in the Senate, the Republican Senate.
Here's what's happening now. We're gonna keep. Girl, please stop talking. Please stop talking right now. Because you know what? What's happening? Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
I won't talk the rest of the show. No problem.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. If you're going to behave like this,
I'm not behaving like anything. I'm trying to show a conservative perspective.
Yes, we understand
that. Talk,
but but what you're doing.
No, I'm not.
We're not doing anything. How about this? Former FBI. We'll be right back.
All right. Now, this is again. I mean, I guess this is why people watch this show. Because if you're watching this show for a real political analysis, I really don't know what to say. You're not going to get that from anybody on this panel. Occasionally, Sunny Hostin will say something that's accurate. Same with Joy. Occasionally, Whoopi. But for the most part, these discussions are just completely empty, and they're just regurgitating what the producers told them in the notes on their card. I mean, you are not getting any actual political analysis on here, which is... I mean, one of the most ridiculous things about all of this is that Meghan McCain is actually an ABC political analyst, as she says in this clip. It's insane. There is no reason why Meghan McCain should be a political analyst anywhere. But here she is given this job. She's given, this job on The View, the job as a political analyst, simply because her father was John McCain. That's it. I mean, she brings nothing to the table at all. Now, so... in a slight defense of Meghan McCain in this instance, it appeared to be her turn to speak. Now, I didn't watch the entire show, so maybe there was a build-up beforehand and she already had her turn. But it appeared here that it was her turn to speak, and and Sunny Hostin began to speak over her. Though, I mean, Sunny was butting in because Meghan McCain was kind of construing what Sunny had just talked about. Sunny was focusing on the Republicans in the Senate. Meghan McCain was focusing on I guess the politics of it, as she says. But regardless, it appeared to be Meghan McCain's turn to speak. But ultimately, this was really a buildup of just years of Meghan McCain talking over everybody else. So maybe, yeah, it wasn't the perfect time to tell Meghan McCain to stop talking, but there could have been, 300 other times where Whoopi Goldberg or anybody else in the panel should have told Meghan to shut up, because she's constantly butting in over everybody else's points. Now, following this confrontation, Meghan McCain tweeted this out, saying, "Dems and Republicans alike need to confront the ugly truth. Both parties are failing to be impartial jurors. I won't be quiet, even if the reality reflects poorly on the entire political establishment. I have a responsibility to speak for the 50% that feels media doesn't represent them." Now, there's so much absurd with this. Speak for the 50% where they feel the media doesn't represent them. So she's talking about conservatives, Republicans. There is an entire news network. The largest news network in the country, Fox News, is entirely dedicated to her viewpoint, to conservatives, to the Republican Party. An entire news network, the largest news network in the country. Yet, the media doesn't represent them. Are you kidding me? I mean, if you want to talk about voters that actually aren't represented, and we'll get to a few angles on this, 70 to 90% of Democrats support Medicare for all. They support progressive policies like Medicare for all, but Medicare for all especially. Incredible, huge support for Medicare for all. How often has this panel disparaged that idea? And not even just panel, news in general. And MSNBC doesn't push for Medicare for all. CNN doesn't push for Medicare for all. Fox News obviously doesn't. Nobody on television, no host on television is pushing for Medicare for all. Occasionally they'll have a guest on, like Bernie Sanders, of course, or someone like Nina Turner, someone who supports the Bernie Sanders campaign, that'll talk about Medicare for all. But when it comes to the actual, the way the news is discussed and the way that issue is handled, they always disparage it. They always act like, oh, Medicare for all, impossible, no one supports it. 70 to 90% of Democrats support it, and 50% of Americans overall. There are polls out there that show 52% of Republicans alone support Medicare for all. Yet, if all you watch is The View or Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, you'll get the idea that Medicare for all, not popular. Same with the Bernie Sanders campaign. The Bernie Sanders campaign is almost being completely ignored, despite the fact that Bernie has been in the top 3 this entire race in polling. He has the most individual donors, the most donations by far, the most fundraising by far, and he's only relying on individual donors. No private fundraisers, no corporate money. Bernie Sanders almost completely ignored. I did a recent story on a PBS news segment. It was an 8-minute news segment on the 2020 race. Bernie Sanders wasn't mentioned once. I'll link to that above. You can see it for yourself. I even linked to the full segment below the video. Watch the entire 8 minutes. Bernie Sanders not mentioned once. So if you want to talk about people not being represented, look at that. Also look at the issue of money in politics. 90% of voters overall acknowledge and understand that money, big money, impacts politics. That when you have these massive corporations and wealthy donors putting money into campaigns, that is obviously going to have an impact on how that politician pushes certain issues or votes certain ways. Now, over 90% of voters understand this. That issue is almost never discussed. You wonder why? It's obviously because massive corporations run these shows. Whether it's The View, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, massive corporations are behind them. So obviously they're not going to focus on the fact that 90% of voters want something done about big money in politics. But let's get to another issue here. So Meghan McCain says, her point here, 50% of Americans are not being represented by the media. Another piece that's wrong with this is the fact that 50% of Americans are not conservatives. They're not Republicans. Almost half the country doesn't vote. So they aren't represented at all. People have become disillusioned by this two-party system that does not represent them. When you have Medicare for all being this issue that is discussed or debated about within the Democratic Party, even though 80 to 90% of their voters support it, and the rest of the industrialized world has a universal healthcare system. I mean, it really shows you that these two parties largely simply answer to big money donors. They don't actually represent the will of the people. So the only issues where there really is a division is on social issues. So issues like gay marriage. There is a difference between both parties. But when it comes to economic issues, they're largely the same. Now, of course, yes, there are differences around the edges. Democrats are a little more willing to increase the minimum wage as opposed to Republicans. But by and large, these two parties are very similar when it comes to economic issues. And another part of this is that many voters are simply disenfranchised, purged from the voter rolls. So if Meghan McCain is actually worried about speaking up for people that are not being represented, then she should be all over this issue of voters being purged for no reason. So let me give you some more data on this. This AP story here. Georgia begins process of purging 300,000 voters from rolls. And this is following what happened last year when Georgia gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp was sued over voter registrations, and that's before he ended up winning the governor race, largely because of those purged voters. So the facts here. A lawsuit was filed against Georgia Secretary of State and gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp, who was in charge of elections and voter registration in Georgia, after the state's exact match verification process was accused of negatively impacting minority voters. The lawsuit comes after an AP analysis discovered over 53,000 voter registration applications sitting in pending status. Nearly 70% of said registrants put on hold are Black, while Georgia's African-American population is approximately 32%. And this is an issue that just doesn't affect Georgia, but it's across the country. So this is official data collected into this map by New York University's Brennan Center for Justice, and it shows the purge rates between 2016 and 2018. And you can see here, practically every district in the country has voters that have been purged, equaling out to about 16 million voters purged during those 2 years. And these purges mainly affect poor communities, communities of color. So when you want to talk about people not being represented in media, in the press, or in the system, Meghan McCain should be focused on this. If she was actually cared about people having a voice that don't have a voice, this should be her number one issue. But of course, that's not what she actually cares about. All she cares about is talking and giving her own view, as opposed to actually representing anything important. But this morning, Meghan McCain couldn't help herself. She tweeted again, saying, good morning to all the fellow conservative girls who won't be quiet, with a gif of Daenerys and one of her dragons here. Now, spoiler alert. Here, how about this? If you haven't seen the end of Game of Thrones, I'm going to wipe my hand like this when I'm done talking, so you'll know I'm done the spoiler. So mute now, and I'm going to begin the spoiler. Daenerys is not a good person. So she goes on to slaughter an entire city of civilians. If this is what Meghan McCain, or this is the character that Meghan McCain wants representing her, maybe, I mean, it's actually kind of accurate considering the kind of policies that she fights for. So, yeah. But if she wants to represent herself in a positive light, then she probably shouldn't be using a gif of Daenerys and her dragon. All right. Spoilers done. Okay. Let's get to some reactions from Twitter to this Meghan McCain stuff. So Parker Malloy says, Meghan McCain likes to shout about how she's the only one bringing a conservative viewpoint to The View, but that's not even accurate. She does know that Abby Huntsman, her co-host, is pretty far right, yeah? She just doesn't start yelling over everyone on the show. ST Fernandez here says, you are trying to make this an attack on your conservatism, but if that were so, everyone would be calling for Abby to be fired as well. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Your refusal to acknowledge your poor behavior towards others will be your downfall. Fruit Case tweets out here saying, Meghan McCain would have you believe that GOP makes up half the country, and that is not true. The amount of GOP voters keeps shrinking. Please stop believing well-rehearsed, often touted lies. We're being held hostage by a small, loud, hateful, and ignorant minority. And Bree Newsome Bass here tweets out, you represent the class of women who've always been given space and a voice and a seat. That's why you feel so comfortable talking over everyone else and then cry victim when someone tells you no. And that's, I think, my favorite take on this. Meghan McCain was born into wealth and privilege. All she's known is that her whole life, she's been surrounded by people that have always listened to her, that have always given her a voice, given her a seat, given her the ability to share her views, even though she largely doesn't know anything, isn't actually educated in this field, doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. But because she's the daughter of John McCain, she gets a free ride. I mean, when you look at both conservative women on that show, both of their dads are in politics. Or I guess in the case of John McCain, was in politics. But that's why they're who they are today. That's why they've been given the opportunities they've been given. Now, in defense of Abby Huntsman, I guess, she at least presents herself a little better. She appears more willing to at least somewhat educate herself, kind of, at least on the conservative perspective, not overall, but on the conservative perspective. Well, when it comes to Meghan McCain, it's just yap, 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 yap. And ultimately, look, this is what the Republican Party is about. Privilege. That's why the two women on the show were born into privilege. That's what the party represents, wealth and privilege. As I said before, look, both parties largely represent their donors, massive corporations and wealthy donors. But when it comes to the Republican Party, I mean, it's just out there. I mean, if you don't know that, if you support the Republican Party and you are, poor or middle class, you're being taken advantage of. They are tricking you by focusing so much on culture issues that behind the scenes they're robbing you. I mean, it's crazy, whether it's like the Trump tax cuts, whether it's giving handing massive giveaways to large corporations. I mean, again and again and again, the Republican Party completely sells out their base while selling them on the cultural issues to get them out to vote. Now, the Democratic Party, of course, I have my criticisms, as you can see on my channel. All the time I criticize the Democratic Party because they are supposed to actually represent people, and they don't. But with the Republican Party, it's just like, there's not even a defense. So the idea that Meghan McCain is trying to represent, the 50% of the country that doesn't have a voice, the wealthiest people in the country, that's who she represents. So if her position here is to represent a point of view, it is the point of view of spoiled rich brats that are born into wealth and privilege. That's all she represents.